Welcome back to Global Power Play, your go-to source for the latest global political news. This is our weekly recap, where we bring you all the biggest stories from the past week, covering key events from the US, Europe, and around the world. Sit back, relax, and let's dive into this week's most important updates. In a shocking move, Canada, one of the largest energy suppliers to the United States, has decided to shut down its $13 billion oil export pipeline to the US. This decision has sent shockwaves through Washington and will undoubtedly lead to massive economic consequences. The question on everyone's mind now is, what happens when America loses its largest energy partner? The effects are already being felt. Gas, oil, and electricity prices in the US have skyrocketed. Everyday Americans are facing significant disruptions to their daily lives. From soaring fuel costs to rising prices in basic goods, this energy crisis could escalate quickly. For years, Canada has been a reliable energy partner for the United States, supplying a significant amount of its oil and natural gas. Now, with the shutdown of the pipeline, Washington finds itself scrambling. The aviation industry is feeling the pinch with higher fuel costs, while transport and manufacturing sectors are seeing production slow down due to skyrocketing energy prices. Major industries like steel, automobile manufacturing, and food production are starting to feel the pressure, leading to cost-cutting measures and potential job losses. The reasoning behind Canada's drastic decision is tied to a long-running trade tension with the United States. For years, the U.S. has imposed heavy tariffs on Canadian goods, thinking that their neighbor wouldn't retaliate. But Canada has made it clear, no more. Canada had long warned Washington about the potential for this shift, but the U.S. ignored the warnings. Now Canada has taken the step of not only halting its oil exports, but also diversifying its energy market. Long-term deals have been signed with countries like China and India. This move not only weakens the U.S.'s grip on Canadian energy, but also strengthens Canada's position as a global energy player. As the U.S. watches its critical energy supply dwindle, Europe and Asia have quickly stepped in. Canada has already signed multi-billion-dollar agreements to supply oil, gas, and electricity to countries in need of stable energy sources. Europe, for example, is looking to replace its reliance on Russian energy, while China and India are securing long-term deals to fuel their rapidly growing economies. This shift in energy flows from North America to Asia and Europe could have far-reaching consequences. The U.S. is now facing not just an energy crisis, but a serious loss of its strategic position in global energy markets. States like New York, California, and Michigan, which rely heavily on hydroelectric power from Canada, could face rolling blackouts during peak winter months. As businesses struggle to cope with the rising costs of energy, layoffs and production cuts are becoming inevitable. Sectors like automotive manufacturing and agriculture are at risk of major losses. While the energy crisis unfolds, political tensions between the U.S. and Canada are at an all-time high. Former President Donald Trump has already threatened to impose a 100% tariff on Canadian auto exports. This threat has escalated the war of words between the two countries, further damaging relations. Canada, however, is not backing down. Prime Minister Mark Carney has made it clear that Canada will not abandon its sovereignty and will not bow to U.S. economic pressure. Canada's response signals a shift in its political stance. In response to the growing tensions, Canada is also reconsidering its defense and military strategies. Ottawa has launched a full review of its $19 billion deal to purchase F-35 fighter jets from the U.S. At the same time, Canada is making strides in strengthening its own defense industry, with significant investments in new military equipment and capabilities. The country is also diversifying its defense partnerships, signaling a move away from reliance on the U.S. The big question now is, how will the U.S. respond? Will Washington be able to recover from this energy disruption, or will this move by Canada signal the beginning of a new world order, one where the U.S. no longer holds the dominant position in global energy and defense? As Canada shifts its focus to Europe and Asia, the U.S. must find new ways to address the rising energy costs, the potential loss of jobs, and the growing uncertainty in global trade. The future looks increasingly uncertain. The U.S. and Canada's relationship is at a breaking point, and the consequences of this energy shutdown will echo across the globe. In a surprising move, Donald Trump has once again brought up the idea of purchasing Greenland. He believes this icy territory, rich in resources and strategically positioned, would be a steal for U.S. national security. But this proposal isn't just a territorial dispute. It's igniting tensions that could have a serious impact on the global economy. In today's video, we're diving into the implications of Trump's Greenland proposal, the trade war with the EU, and how it could affect your wallet. Cost of Greenland and the global backlash. For decades, Greenland has been part of Denmark, but Trump's comments have reignited tensions. Denmark, and by extension, Greenland's government, have strongly rejected the idea of selling the island. Greenland's leadership made it clear, we are not for sale.
Greenland have been part of the Danish kingdom for 800 years. It's an integrated part of our country. It is not for sale. Let me put it in words you might understand. Mr. Trump, f*** off.
This isn't just about land, it's a matter of sovereignty. European leaders, including Germany and France, have backed Denmark, firmly opposing any attempt to undermine the region's self-determination. So, why does this matter to you? The US-EU trade war and car prices. Trump's push for Greenland isn't happening in a vacuum. He's also accused the EU of unfair trade practices, particularly in the automobile industry. The US imports millions of European-made cars, but American manufacturers face serious barriers when trying to sell in Europe. In response, Trump is threatening to impose tariffs on major German car makers like Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes, which could lead to higher prices for European vehicles in the US. And it doesn't stop there. European leaders, including Ursula von der Leyen of the European Commission, have vowed to retaliate strongly if tariffs go forward. Speaking of Tesla faces trouble in Europe. Tesla, once a symbol of innovation and a leader in the electric vehicle market, is now facing growing scrutiny. Denmark, one of Tesla's key markets, has seen pension funds pull their investments due to the company's stance on labor unions. Meanwhile, across Northern Europe, strikes and protests against Tesla's labor policies are escalating, creating a storm for Elon Musk's company. In Germany, Tesla's sales plummeted by 76% in February 2025, despite the overall European electric vehicle market growing by 30%. The reason? Many consumers are turning away from Tesla, increasingly favoring local brands like Volkswagen and Renault. U.S. economy, a growing crisis? The global trade war and internal labor issues aren't the only challenges the U.S. faces. With the U.S. economy heading toward a potential recession, Trump's economic policies are under scrutiny. The GDP is expected to grow only 1.7% next year, and inflation is still high. But in the midst of this, the White House has been embroiled in controversy, with Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt offering misleading statements at a recent press conference. From unexplained Trade Commission dismissals to attacks on judges, the press conference became a chaotic spectacle, distracting from the serious economic issues at hand. But what about the leaked military information under Trump's administration? That's right, sensitive military plans related to Yemen were accidentally shared in an unsecured chat group. Trump's economic strategy. Is it working? Despite the worsening economy, Trump continues to defend his trade policies, arguing that they're part of a necessary transition. However, the inconsistency in his tariff decisions has created widespread instability, with companies and investors uncertain about future moves. The unpredictability of these policies is hurting U.S. businesses, particularly in industries like manufacturing. On March 29, 2025, the Trump administration officially confirmed that a hefty 25% tariff would be levied on cars and automotive parts imported from Mexico.
I believe that's why, effective at midnight, we will impose a 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles.
Set to take effect on April 2nd. This decision has been years in the making, driven by Trump's America First agenda, which aims to strengthen U.S. manufacturing and reduce reliance on foreign imports. In his announcement, Trump argued that the new tariff would bring jobs back to the U.S., specifically to the automotive industry, sparking growth that would resonate across the country. For Mexico, the announcement of this tariff immediately sent shockwaves through its economy, especially the automotive sector, which has been integral to its relationship with the U.S. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum addressed the nation on April 1, 2025, stating that the country must remain open to dialogue and avoid retaliatory actions that would further escalate the trade war. "We do not believe in an eye for an eye," she said, advocating for a measured response to the situation. Mexico's economy, which is highly dependent on trade with the U.S., particularly in the automotive sector, faces major challenges as these tariffs take effect. In 2024, Mexico exported over $182 billion worth of cars and auto parts to the U.S., the joint response of Mexico and Canada. Meanwhile, Canada is not remaining silent in the face of these developments. On April 1, 2025, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney engaged in a telephone conversation with Sheinbaum to discuss how the two countries could jointly respond to the escalating trade tensions with the U.S. In a statement following the call, Carney emphasized the need for a united front, saying, "We must act with common sense to protect North America's competitiveness." Carney and Sheinbaum have reportedly discussed working together to persuade the Trump administration to reconsider its unilateral approach to trade negotiations. While Canada's automotive exports to the U.S. are not as large as Mexico's, it still faces significant impact on the Mexican automotive industry. The real impact of these tariffs on Mexico's automotive sector is just beginning to be felt. In 2024, nearly 70% of Mexico's automotive exports were directed toward the U.S. market, and any increase in tariffs would immediately inflate prices, reduce demand, and threaten the viability of production lines along the northern border. As Sheinbaum remarked in her speech on April 1st, "If the tariffs remain, thousands of workers in our border regions could lose their jobs, and our export volume would drop significantly." While Mexico is reportedly considering targeting U.S. agricultural products, electronics, and even beverages with tariffs, Sheinbaum has expressed a preference for avoiding a full-scale trade war. "We must prioritize protecting our interests without sacrificing our economic stability," she argued, indicating that while retaliation is on the table, it should be measured and strategic. However, if negotiations with the U.S. do not yield results, Mexico may find itself with limited options. The growing trade tensions and economic fallout. As the tariffs officially went into effect on April 2, 2025, customs checkpoints at the U.S.-Mexico border were reportedly backed up as Mexican exporters began to face the new tax rates. U.S. economists are already warning of the long-term consequences of this trade war. Higher prices for vehicles and automotive parts imported from Mexico are expected to increase costs for American consumers, which could lead to a decline in demand and hurt U.S. auto dealers.
April 2nd, 2025 is a historic date that could reshape the global energy market for decades. On this day, Canada's energy future was forever changed with the official launch of the Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion, TMX. With a staggering $34 billion price tag and nearly a decade of delays, this expansion finally opens the door to new international markets for Canada's oil. The energy world is watching closely as TMX begins pumping 890,000 barrels of crude daily, a critical shift for Canada, which has struggled for years with limited market access. But this major change also brings new geopolitical tensions and challenges, especially as President Trump's tariffs threaten Canada's trade relationships. At the heart of this shift is the $34 billion Trans Mountain Expansion. But just as Canada's oil found its new route to the Pacific, a major threat emerged from south of the border. Former President Donald Trump, eyeing a political comeback, introduced a potential 10% tariff on Canadian oil. This move sent shockwaves through Canada's oil industry, which could face losses upwards of $10 billion annually if the tariffs take effect. Canada's oil, which was once tied to U.S. interests, now flows toward China and beyond. This deal is a sign of things to come. China's demand for heavy crude, particularly from Canada's oil sands, is skyrocketing. According to Reuters, Rangsheng is also eyeing other major players like Cenovus Energy and Canadian Natural Resources to expand its foothold in the Canadian energy sector. For Canada, this is a game changer. The Trans Mountain Expansion is projected to add $20 billion to the Canadian economy annually, but there's a catch. Environmental groups still warn about the risks of an oil spill on Canada's Pacific coast. The Canadian government has responded with a $1.5 billion spill response fund, but the debate is far from over. Meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government is pushing back against Trump's tariffs. In 2023, Canada's oil exports to the US were worth over $200 billion. But if these tariffs stick, Canadian producers could be squeezed, leading to a possible rise in fuel prices for American consumers. The Trans Mountain expansion and Canada's growing energy ties with China are reshaping the global energy market. As Asia's demand for oil increases, Canada is positioning itself as a key player. This is no longer just about US ties, it's about securing long-term contracts with global players, especially in China. And it's not just oil. Natural gas is also in the spotlight. Canada's $40 billion LNG Canada project in British Columbia is set to ship 14 million tons of liquefied natural gas annually starting in 2025, targeting Japan and China. This diversification away from US exports could completely alter the North American energy landscape. As Canada diversifies its energy exports, it's positioning itself as a versatile energy titan. Whether it's oil, natural gas, or hydroelectric power, Canada is aiming to become a key supplier to Asia's booming economies. With TMX and LNG Canada leading the charge, Canada is shifting its energy focus away from the US, and the world is watching. But the questions remain. Can Canada seize this moment to become a true global energy leader? Will China's growing influence in Canada's energy sector eclipse the US once and for all? And will President Trump's tariffs become the spark that accelerates this shift, or a wrench in the works? The energy dynamics in North America and beyond are changing, and Canada is at the center of it all.
In a move that has shocked the global energy market, China has unexpectedly stopped importing liquefied natural gas, LNG, from the United States, valued at $2.4 billion annually. This shift, which occurred in March 2025, isn't just about energy. It's a significant geopolitical statement. While the U.S. watches from the sidelines, Australia has stepped in to replace the U.S. as China's leading energy partner, shifting the balance of power in the energy markets and beyond. In March 2025, China abruptly suspended its LNG imports from the United States. This is viewed as a direct response to a recent 10% tariff imposed by Washington on Chinese goods. The U.S., the world's largest LNG exporter, with over 91 million tons produced in 2024, immediately lost its second-largest market, sending shockwaves through the global energy system. With Europe in need of alternative energy sources post-Russia-Ukraine conflict, China quickly redirected its LNG shipments to the continent, offering cheaper gas and bypassing U.S. tariffs. Countries like Germany, Italy, and the Netherlands eagerly welcomed the cheaper LNG, boosting their energy security. In response, the EU launched storage projects and ramped up investment in infrastructure to capitalize on this new energy source. While the U.S. LNG industry reels from canceled contracts and rising shipping costs, Australia quietly secured a $1.5 billion deal with China Resources Gas. This long-term contract, starting in 2027, will supply 600,000 tons of LNG per year. Australia's LNG is not only 20% cheaper than American gas, but it's also faster to ship due to its proximity to China. This deal isn't just economic, it's a geopolitical shift. Australia, once a U.S. ally, is now China's key energy partner. This strategic realignment highlights China's push for energy autonomy. With an enormous population and growing economy, LNG is essential to meeting China's energy demands. Over time, China has reduced its reliance on U.S. LNG, signing agreements with Qatar, Russia, and Central Asia. This diversification of energy sources is part of China's broader strategy to avoid dependence on a single partner, particularly amid growing tensions with the U.S. Meanwhile, the U.S. faces a significant loss in influence and market share. LNG exports to China accounted for $2.4 billion annually, but with China pivoting to Australia and other suppliers, U.S. export terminals are left with unsold stock. This is a serious blow to the U.S. energy sector, signaling potential restructuring in the industry. As the U.S. faces setbacks, Canada is stepping into the breach. With China gradually replacing U.S. LNG imports, Canada is securing a greater share of China's energy market. Canada's LNG Canada project, one of North America's largest export facilities, is set to begin operations in 2025. Additionally, Canada's oil exports, particularly through the Trans Mountain expansion in our TMX pipeline, are flowing more steadily to China, reducing its reliance on the U.S. The shift in energy trade could mark a new phase in U.S.-Canada relations, with Canada now a central energy partner to China. The U.S. energy sector is at a crossroads. As China diversifies its energy sources, Europe, Australia, and Canada stand to gain from this realignment. With the U.S. losing ground in both energy and trade, questions remain. Will the U.S. recalibrate its strategy, or is this the beginning of a long-term decline in American economic influence? Did you know that the last couple of years have seen the highest number of tariff changes in recent history? And now things are about to shift again. What does this mean for you, your business, and the economy? Let's find out. How does a simple pause on tariffs by a former president shake the economy and global trade? Is it good news or just a temporary solution? Welcome back. Today we're diving deep into one of the most talked about topics in global economics right now, tariffs. Specifically, Trump's recent decision to hit pause on tariffs.
Somebody had to do what we did, and I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate. And that's what I did with China, because they did retaliate.
You've probably heard about them, but let's break down exactly what's going on and why this decision could be a game changer. First things first. What exactly are tariffs? Simply put, tariffs are taxes that governments impose on imported goods, making them more expensive. They're often used to protect domestic industries or punish trading partners. Trump's tariffs, especially during his presidency, were a major part of his trade policies, aimed at pressuring other nations to change trade practices, particularly with China. But here's the catch. Tariffs don't just impact the countries they're aimed at. They hit businesses and consumers too. Companies have to pay higher prices for materials, which often leads to increased prices for you and me. So we end up paying more for things like electronics, clothing, and even food. And businesses, especially small ones, struggle to deal with higher costs. Now fast forward to today, the pause has triggered mixed reactions. Some economists and business leaders are celebrating, saying this could lead to a drop in consumer prices and a boost in international trade. But others are skeptical. Will this pause actually help in the long term, or will we see tariffs ramp up again in the future, leading to even more volatility in the market? To sum it up, Trump's pause on tariffs is more than just a headline. It's a shift in trade policy that could have major consequences for businesses, consumers, and even global relations. While it may bring temporary relief, the question remains. Is this a step toward better trade deals, or just another pause before the next round of economic turbulence? Now, I want to hear from you. How do you think this tariff pause will impact your day-to-day life and the economy? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more insights into the latest economic policies. See you in the next video.